German Panther crews laughed at American Shermans until 4 tanks destroyed 8 Panthers in 10 minutes. September 22nd, 1944. Eastern France. A foggy morning near the village of Arracourt. Captain Jimmy Lemons spots something through his periscope. 8 German Panther tanks advancing in column formation. He has 4 Shermans. The Germans don't see him yet. What happens next will last exactly 10 minutes, and all 8 Panthers will be destroyed. Now, if you know anything about World War II tanks, you're probably thinking, that's impossible, because the Panther was a monster. 80 millimeters of frontal armor, sloped at 55 degrees. A 75 millimeter gun, capable of penetrating a Sherman from 1.5 kilometers, thanks to a larger propellant charge and a longer barrel, which provided a very high muzzle velocity and excellent armor-piercing performance. Speed, power, engineering perfection. The Sherman, 51 millimeters of armor. A 75 millimeter gun that often bounced harmlessly off Panther hulls. It was taller, easier to hit, and burned like a tinderbox when penetrated. German tankers had a nickname for it, the Tommy Cooker. Because American crews roasted alive inside, they didn't fear the Sherman, they laughed at it. And they had good reason. In a straight fight one-on-one, the Panther won almost every time. And yet, in 11 days, September 18th to 29th, 1944, during the Battle of Arracourt, American tankers destroyed 281 German tanks. They lost 21, a kill ratio of 10-1 in favor of the Sherman. Germany's 5th Panzer Army, an entire armored force, was obliterated by tanks the enemy considered obsolete. This is the story of the Battle of Arracourt, the greatest tank battle almost no one has ever heard of, where American inferior tanks crushed one of Germany's last armored offensives in the West, where tactics, training, and sheer audacity defeated superior technology. But to understand how this happened, you need to know how the Americans even got here. Because just 3 weeks earlier, they were 400 miles away, and everyone thought the war would be over by Christmas. August 1944. 2 months after D-Day, the Allies are still stuck in Normandy, grinding through the bocage, French hedgerow country, where every field is a fortress and every lane is a death trap. Then, on July 25th, Operation Cobra. 2,400 American bombers carpet bomb a 5-mile stretch of German lines. The earth itself seems to explode. When the smoke clears, there's a hole in the German front. And through that hole comes George Patton. His 3rd Army, 4 armored divisions, 12 infantry divisions, over 200,000 men, pours through the gap like water through a broken dam. Leading the charge, the 4th Armored Division. Patton calls them the fist. Not the tip of the spear, the entire fist. They don't just punch through enemy lines, they race past them. 50 miles in a day, 70 miles, 100 miles. By mid-August, they've liberated over 30 French towns, captured thousands of German prisoners, destroyed hundreds of vehicles. The Germans are in full retreat. Divisions are collapsing. Officers are abandoning their units. It's not a withdrawal, it's a rout. And Patton has a target, Nancy. Nancy, a medieval city on the Moselle River. The gateway to Lorraine, the gateway to Germany itself. Take Nancy, cross the Moselle, and the road to the Rhine is wide open. Patton's tankers are writing letters home. We'll be in Germany by October, Christmas in Berlin. Some units are literally racing each other to see who can advance fastest. War correspondents are calling it the Great Swan, this effortless glide across France. But swans need water to glide on, and Patton's tanks, they're running on empty. September 1944. The 3rd Army grinds to a halt, not because of German resistance, because they're out of gas. Every gallon of fuel has to be trucked 450 miles from the Normandy beaches. Every artillery shell, every spare part, every meal. The Allies don't control any deep water ports yet. The Germans blew up every railroad bridge as they retreated, so everything moves by truck. And there aren't enough trucks. Patton is furious. He's watching the German army collapse in front of him, and he can't pursue because his tanks are sitting empty in French fields. In his diary entries from early September, Patton writes with barely controlled rage about the fuel shortage. His frustration is palpable. He believes this is the greatest opportunity to end the war, and it's slipping away because of logistics. But there's a bigger problem: politics. Supreme Allied Command, Eisenhower's headquarters, has to make a choice. Who gets the fuel? Patton in the south, or British Field Marshal Montgomery in the north? Monty's planning a massive operation called Market Garden, airborne assault, cross the Rhine, end the war by Christmas. It's bold, it's ambitious, and it needs every drop of available fuel. Eisenhower makes his decision. Montgomery gets priority. Patton gets just enough fuel to hold position, not to attack, not to advance, just to wait. So, the Third Army sits and waits on starvation rations, 5 gallons of fuel per vehicle per day, barely enough to run patrol routes. Artillery battalions are rationed to 10 shells per day, 10 shells for guns that normally fire hundreds. Letters and diary entries from this period show the depth of Patton's frustration. In one particularly colourful passage, he writes that if he could only get the supplies he needs, he'd punch through the German Siegfried Line. That's Patton, eloquent as always, and some of his units take matters into their own hands. There are documented reports of American tank crews raiding their own supply depots at night, siphoning fuel from engineer units, liberating jerry cans from British convoys. One battalion commander writes home, "We've become the best thieves in France. But even stolen fuel can only get you so far." Patton makes a decision. If he can't advance deep into Germany, he'll take what's right in front of him. Nancy. If he can cross the Moselle River and secure Nancy, he'll have a bridgehead, a staging ground. And when the fuel finally arrives, he'll be ready to punch straight into the heart of Germany. But there's a problem. The Germans are digging in. September 12, 1944. After 10 days of preparation, scrounging fuel, stockpiling ammunition, planning every detail, 13th Corps launches its assault across the Moselle River. At dawn, American artillery opens up, hundreds of guns. The riverbanks erupt in smoke and fire. Infantry crosses in assault boats. Engineers throw up pontoon bridges under fire. The Germans fight back. Machine guns, mortars, artillery, but no 13th Corps keeps coming. By nightfall, they're across. Multiple bridgeheads, tanks rolling over pontoon bridges, and leading the advance, the 4th Armoured Division. They push east from the river toward the town of Arracourt, a small village surrounded by rolling hills and thick forests. It doesn't look like much, a few stone buildings, a church, farmland. But it's perfect. High ground overlooking the approaches from the east. Good roads leading west to Nancy and the American supply lines. Natural cover, forests, ridges, small valleys. By September 13th, the 4th Armoured has secured Arracourt and pushed out patrols to the east. Nancy is taken, the bridgehead is secure. American tank crews are celebrating, patting each other on the back, cracking open bottles of liberated French wine. But 40 miles to the east, German commanders are looking at the same maps, and they're not celebrating, they're planning. Adolf Hitler himself is watching the situation in Lorraine. He sees what's happening. The Americans are creating a springboard into Germany. If Patton gets fuel, if Patton gets reinforcements, if Patton gets the green light, he'll be across the Rhine in weeks. Germany can't allow that. So Hitler issues an order. General Hasso von Manteuffel, one of Germany's best panzer commanders, assembles his forces. The 111th Panzer Brigade, the 113th Panzer Brigade, elements of the 11th Panzer Division, over 400 tanks, Panthers, Panzer Arracourts, self-propelled guns, Infantry support. Their target? The 4th Armored Division at Arracourt. Von Manteuffel studies the terrain. He studies intelligence reports on American strength. His Panthers are superior to the American Shermans. His crews are veterans from the Eastern Front. His forces outnumber the Americans in the sector. On paper, it's a German victory waiting to happen. The Americans think the war will be over by Christmas. The Germans think otherwise, and they have a plan. On September 18th at dawn, the German 5th Panzer Army attacks. The Battle of Arracourt begins, and Captain Jimmy Lemons, with his 4 Shermans, is about to become a legend. September 10th, 1944, East Prussia. German Army Group G headquarters. General Hasso von Manteuffel receives his orders directly from Adolf Hitler. The message is clear and blunt. Von Manteuffel is 47 years old, a career soldier, a veteran of the Eastern Front who's fought in some of the most brutal battles of the war. Kursk, the Cherkasy Pocket, the desperate fighting in Ukraine. He's seen what happens when you underestimate your enemy. He's seen entire divisions destroyed because commanders were too arrogant or too stupid to adapt. He's not arrogant, and he's not stupid. His mission? Assemble the newly formed 5th Panzer Army, counterattack toward Nancy, destroy the American bridgehead, push Patton's 3rd Army back across the Moselle River. If successful, the German front stabilizes. The Rhine remains secure. Germany buys precious time. Von Manteuffel studies the maps. He knows the terrain. Lorraine is rolling hills, thick forests, small villages with narrow stone streets. Good defensive terrain. Not ideal for tanks, but workable. He knows the enemy. Patton's 4th Armored Division is overstretched, low on fuel, exhausted from 2 months of near-constant combat. And he knows his own forces. That's where it gets complicated. On paper, the 5th Panzer Army looks formidable. 3 main striking forces, 111th Panzer Brigade, brand new Panthers. Just rolled off the assembly lines. Panther AUSF, G models with upgraded armor, improved engines, better gun optics. 113th Panzer Brigade, more Panthers, more new equipment. And the centerpiece, 11th Panzer Division, Gespenster Division, the Ghost Division, a legendary unit, veterans of the Eastern Front. They fought at Stalingrad, survived the hell of the Cherkasy Pocket, and withdrew all the way from southern Russia. They've been fighting non-stop for 3 years, against the Soviets, against odds that would break most units. If any German formation can stop Patton, it's them. But there's a problem. Actually, 3 problems. Problem 1, the crews. The 111th and 113th Panzer Brigades are equipped with the best tanks Germany can produce. But their crews, fresh from training school. Most have never been in combat. Some have less than 6 weeks of tank training, just enough to know which lever makes the tank go forward and which button fires the gun. Compare that to American crews who've been fighting since North Africa, Sicily, Normandy. Problem 2, fuel. Germany is running out of oil. The Romanian oil fields, Germany's main source, are being overrun by the Soviets. Synthetic fuel production can't keep up. The 5th Panzer Army has enough fuel for 1 major offensive, maybe 2 if they're lucky. After that, they're as immobile as the Americans. Problem 3. Coordination. The 5th Panzer Army was assembled in less than 2 weeks. Units pulled from different sectors, different commanders, different communication systems. The 11th Panzer Division uses 1 radio frequency, the 111th Brigade uses another, the 113th uses a third. There's been no time for joint exercises, no time to develop cohesion, no time to learn how to fight as a unified force. Von Manteuffel knows all this, but he also knows his advantages. The Panther is a better tank than the Sherman, objectively, measurably. Its 75mm KWK-42 gun can penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at 2,000 yards. A Sherman 75mm gun can barely scratch a Panther's frontal armor at 500 yards. The Panther has thicker armor, better optics, a more powerful engine. In a straight fight, tank versus tank, front to front, the Panther wins every time, and von Manteuffel has over 400 of them. On September 17th, the 5th Panzer Army completes its assembly east of the city of Château-Salins, 40 miles from Arracourt. Von Manteuffel issues his attack orders. His plan is straightforward, aggressive, very German. Hit the Americans with overwhelming force. Use the Panthers' superior firepower to smash through their defensive positions. Drive west to Nancy, cut off and destroy any American units caught in the open. It should work. Von Manteuffel believes it will work. What he doesn't know is that the Americans have been preparing for this exact scenario for months. September 18th, 1944, 6:47 a.m. Dawn breaks over the forests east of Arracourt. Thick fog blankets the rolling hills. Visibility, less than 200 yards. Perfect conditions for an attack. German tank columns begin to move. The 113th Panzer Brigade advancing from the northeast. 40 Panthers, supporting infantry. The 111th Panzer Brigade advancing from the east. Another 50 Panthers. Elements of the 11th Panzer Division moving up in reserve. They're moving fast, aggressively, exactly as trained. The plan is to catch the Americans off guard, hit them before they can organize a defense, before they can call in artillery, before they can coordinate a response. At 7:15 a.m., an American forward observer from the 4th Armored Division spots movement through the fog. Dark shapes, dozens of them. He radios back to headquarters. Enemy armor, multiple columns, moving west. Estimate battalion strength or larger. Within minutes, alarm spreads through the American positions. Tank crews scramble to their Shermans. Engines roar to life. Commanders grab maps, radios, binoculars. They've been expecting this. Intelligence reports warned them the Germans were massing for a counterattack. But expecting something and experiencing it are two different things. The American positions around Arracourt are spread thin. Very thin. Combat Command A is north of the town. Combat Command B is south. Reserve units are miles away. If the Germans hit with concentrated force at a single point, they could punch right through. By 8 a.m., the first shots are fired. A Panther column emerges from the fog less than 800 yards from an American position. Both sides see each other at almost the same moment. And here's where everything you came for begins. The tank duel. Sherman versus Panther. 400 German tanks against fewer than 200 American tanks. Arracourt. The largest tank battle on the Western Front is about to begin, and Captain Jimmy Lemons, the man you met at the start of this story, is sitting in his Sherman, watching 40 German Panthers roll toward his position. He has 4 tanks. 4. What happens next will be studied in military academies for the next 80 years. September 19th, 1944, 7:30 a.m. The fog is even thicker than yesterday. Visibility, maybe 150 yards, maybe less. American tank crews around Arracourt are at their positions, engines idling, gun barrels pointed east, waiting. They can hear them before they see them. The deep, unmistakable growl of German tank engines, dozens of them. Then, shapes emerge from the fog. Dark, massive, angular, Panthers, Combat Command. A, the northern defensive sector, takes the first hit. The 113th Panzer Brigade, 40 Panthers strong, comes straight down the main road from Château-Salins. No subtlety, no deception, just raw, concentrated force. The Americans are outnumbered. Badly. Combat Command A has maybe 20 Shermans spread across a 2-mile front. 40 Panthers against 20 Shermans. On paper, it's a massacre waiting to happen. At 8 a.m., the first shots are fired. An American Sherman, hull down behind a low ridge, spots a Panther at 600 yards. He fires. The 75mm shell hits the Panther's frontal armor and bounces off. Literally, the shell ricochets into the dirt, leaving nothing but a dark smudge on the Panther's glacis plate. The Panther's turret swivels, almost lazily. The long 75mm gun zeroes in. One shot. The Sherman explodes, turret blown clean off, ammo cooking off inside, 4 men dead in an instant. This is the nightmare scenario American tank crews have been warned about. The Panther can kill you from ranges where you can't even hurt it. Within 20 minutes, Combat Command A has lost 6 Shermans. The Germans are pushing forward, methodically, confidently. American radio traffic is frantic, units calling for support, commanders repositioning platoons, desperate requests for artillery. It looks like the German plan is working, but the Americans aren't panicking, and they're definitely not running. Here's the thing about the Sherman versus Panther matchup. Yes, the Panther is the better tank, but better tank doesn't automatically mean better outcome. Let's be clear about the technical gap. In a head-to-head duel at medium range, the Panther wins, every time. But the Americans aren't fighting head-to-head duels, they're fighting smart. The terrain around Arracourt is rolling hills, small forests, hedgerows, stone villages. It's not the open plains of eastern Ukraine where German tanks usually operate. Here, engagement ranges are short. Lines of sight are broken. There are 1,000 places to hide, and the Sherman, lighter, more agile, faster to accelerate, can use that. American tank commanders start adapting immediately. No frontal engagements. If you see a Panther head-on, you don't shoot. You reposition. Use terrain. Get hull down behind ridges. Fire, then reverse before the Panther can return fire. Flank shots. The Panther's side armor is much thinner, 40mm. A Sherman 75mm gun can penetrate that at close range. Combined arms. Don't fight alone. Coordinate with artillery, tank destroyers, infantry, and then there's artillery. The Americans have so much artillery. By 10 a.m., American forward observers have called in fire missions on every German column they can spot. 105mm howitzers, 155m guns, even corps-level artillery, massive 8-inch guns that can drop a shell the size of a garbage can onto a target 10 miles away. The Germans are advancing, yes, but they're advancing through a hurricane of high-explosive shells. Panthers start taking hits, not from tanks, from artillery. A 155mm shell won't penetrate a Panther's armor, but it doesn't have to. It can blow off a track, damage the engine, kill the commander standing in the turret, shatter optics, wound the crew with shrapnel. A mobility-killed Panther is just as useless as the destroyed Panther. By midday, the German advance has stalled, not broken, not routed, but stalled. The 113th Panzer Brigade has taken casualties, several Panthers knocked out, more damaged, infantry support units disrupted by artillery, and the Americans are learning, fast. Around 1 p.m., September 19th, the fog finally lifts, and the sky fills with aircraft. P-47 Thunderbolts, the Jug, American ground attack fighters. Each one carries 850 caliber machine guns, rockets, and bombs, and they've been waiting all morning for the weather to clear. The German columns are caught in the open. Panthers, half-tracks, supply trucks, infantry, all exposed on roads and open fields. The P-47s come in low, very low. Rockets streak down. High-explosive bombs tumble from wing racks. 50 caliber rounds hammer anything that moves. A Panther can shrug off a Sherman 75mm gun. It can't shrug off a 500-pound bomb. Within an hour, the German offensive is in chaos. Radio communications break down. Supply convoys are scattered. Infantry units lose contact with their supporting armor. German commanders try to regroup, but every time a column forms up on a road, American pilots spot it and tear it apart. Von Manteuffel's plan, the aggressive, concentrated thrust toward Nancy, is falling apart. Not because the Americans have better tanks, because the Americans have air superiority. By late afternoon, the German attack has lost momentum. Units pull back into the forests, seeking cover from the airstrikes. The advance continues, but it's slower, cautious, fragmented. The Americans have bought themselves time. By the evening of September 20th, 2 full days of fighting, the picture is complicated. The Germans have advanced. They've pushed the Americans back in several sectors. They've inflicted casualties, but they haven't broken through. Arracourt is still in American hands. The defensive line is battered but holding. The cost: American losses, approximately 15 to 20 Sherman tanks destroyed or damaged. Around 60 casualties, killed, wounded, or missing. German losses. Estimates vary, but at least 25 to 30 Panthers and other armored vehicles knocked out or abandoned. Over 100 casualties. Several supply convoys destroyed by airstrikes. The Americans are learning. They're learning how to fight Panthers, learning how to use terrain, learning how to coordinate armor, artillery, and air power, and they're learning fast. Tank commanders share lessons. Don't engage frontally. Flank them. Use artillery. Call in airstrikes. Move fast. Don't sit still. Crew chiefs pass on survival tips. If you see a Panther, report its position. Don't try to be a hero. Work as a team. The Germans, meanwhile, are realizing something uncomfortable. This isn't going to be easy. The Americans aren't collapsing. They're not retreating in panic. They're adapting. And they have resources the Germans can only dream of. Endless artillery ammunition, air support on call, replacement tanks arriving daily. Von Manterfell's diary entries from this period reflect growing concern. He describes fierce American resistance, effective use of artillery, devastating air attacks. He still believes he can win, but it's going to take more than just superior tanks. September 21st and 22nd pass with lighter skirmishing. Both sides regroup, reinforce, prepare. The Americans strengthen their defenses around Arracourt, bring up reserves, stockpile ammunition. The Germans reorganize their shattered columns, repair damaged vehicles, plan their next move. But this was only the opening round. The real battle, the one that will be studied in military academies for decades, is about to begin. September 29th, 1944. The largest armored clash of the Battle of Arracourt, and Captain Jimmy Lemons, still alive, still fighting, still commanding his 4 Shermans, is about to face the fight of his life. September 22nd, 1944. 6:00 a.m., 3 days into the Battle of Arracourt, and the Germans are preparing their biggest push yet. The 111th Panzer Brigade, one of Germany's newest armored formations, is moving into position. Fresh Panthers, full strength, over 60 tanks. Their mission: break through Combat Command A's defensive line, capture Arracourt, open the road to Nancy. This isn't a probing attack. This isn't a skirmish. This is an all-out assault. The plan is straightforward. Concentrated armor thrust along the main road. Punch through the American positions before they can react. Use speed and firepower to overwhelm any resistance. The terrain favors the attack. Relatively open ground. Good roads, clear fields of fire. On paper, it should work. The Germans have learned from the last 3 days. They're bringing infantry support. They're coordinating artillery. They're timing the attack for early morning, before American air support can intervene. Von Manteuffel himself is watching this attack closely. The 111th Panzer Brigade is supposed to be elite. New equipment, trained crews, strong leadership. If they can't break the Americans here, the entire offensive is in jeopardy. On the American side, Combat Command A knows something big is coming. Reconnaissance patrols reported German buildup throughout the night. Radio intercepts picked up increased German traffic. Forward observers spotted vehicle lights moving in the dark. Every tank crew has been at their position since before dawn. Engines cold to avoid detection, guns loaded, radios tuned in. They're outnumbered. They know it. But they're dug in, and they're ready. At 7 a.m., the German attack begins. The village of Bézange-la-Petite, a tiny farming community. Population, maybe 200. Stone houses, a church, fields of grain. And on the morning of September 22nd, it becomes the center of one of the most lopsided tank battles of World War II. At 7:30 a.m., 8 Panthers from the 111th Panzer Brigade advance toward Bézange-la-Petite. Their objective: secure the village, establish a firebase, support the main attack. Standard armor tactics, textbook execution. What they don't know is that 4 American Shermans are already there. Captain William Lamison, Company C, 37th Tank Battalion, 4 M4 Shermans under his command. He's been holding this position since yesterday evening, waiting for exactly this scenario. The odds: 8 Panthers against 4 Shermans. The Panthers have superior guns, superior armor, superior numbers. But Lamison has position, concealment, and a plan. At 800 yards, Lamison's gunner spots the lead Panther. He doesn't fire. He waits. The Panthers keep coming. 700 yards. 600 yards. Still, Lamison waits. Here's what Lamison knows. At long range, his 75mm gun is useless against a Panther's frontal armor. But at close range, under 500 yards, he can target weak spots, side armor, turret rings, engine decks, and if the Panthers don't know he's there, he gets the first shot. At 500 yards, Lamison gives the order. His gunner fires. The lead Panther is hit in the side. It lurches, smoke pouring from the engine compartment. The crew bails out. The other 3 Shermans open fire simultaneously. 3 more Panthers are hit within seconds. The German formation scatters, tanks peeling left and right, trying to locate the threat, return fire. But the Americans aren't where the Germans expect them to be. Lamison's tanks don't sit still. They fire, reverse behind cover, reposition, fire again. The Germans are firing back, 75mm rounds slamming into buildings, tearing through stone walls. But they're shooting at positions the Americans have already left. Within 5 minutes, 3 more Panthers are knocked out. 1 takes a hit to the turret ring. The turret jams. Crew abandons the tank. Another is hit in the tracks. Immobilized, it becomes a sitting target for follow-up shots. A third is struck in the rear by a flanking Sherman. Catastrophic ammunition explosion. The remaining Panther, the 8th, tries to retreat. It backs into a ditch, stuck. Lamison's gunner puts 2 rounds into it at point-blank range. 10 minutes, 8 Panthers destroyed or disabled, 4 Shermans still operational. American casualties, 0. This is the fight that will be taught in armor schools for the next 80 years, not because the Sherman was better than the Panther, but because tactics, positioning, and crew skill matter more than armor thickness. But Bézange-la-Petite is just one battle. Across the entire sector, the Germans are attacking everywhere at once, and the real chaos is just beginning. By 10 a.m. September 22nd, the Battle of Arracourt has exploded into complete chaos. The German attack isn't focused on one point. It's everywhere. The 111th Panzer Brigade is hitting Combat Command A from the northeast. Elements of the 113th Panzer Brigade are probing from the east. German infantry, supported by assault guns, are pushing into the villages around Arracourt. The Americans are fighting on 5 different fronts simultaneously, and they're vastly outnumbered. American radio traffic is frantic. Contact! Enemy armor, 12 o'clock, multiple vehicles. We need artillery on grid, 6482 now. Baker Company is pulling back. We've lost 3 tanks. This is combined arms warfare at its most brutal. German Panthers advance under cover of artillery barrages, 105mm and 150mm shells churning up the earth, suppressing American positions. American artillery fires back. Counter-battery missions trying to silence German guns, defensive fire missions hitting German infantry concentrations. And then the skies open up. American P-47 Thunderbolts appear overhead, diving through sporadic German anti-aircraft fire. They hammer German columns with rockets and bombs, but the Germans have learned they're dispersing their vehicles, using forests for cover, moving in short bursts to avoid airstrikes. The Americans need something fast, something mobile, something that can respond to multiple threats across a fluid battlefield. Enter the M18 Hellcat. The Hellcat isn't a tank, it's a tank destroyer. It's designed for one mission: kill enemy armor, then get the hell out before they can shoot back. Thin armor means it can't slug it out toe-to-toe with a Panther, but speed means it doesn't have to. Throughout the afternoon, Hellcat platoons race across the battlefield, responding to German breakthroughs. A German column pushes through a gap in the American line. Hellcats sprint to the flanks, hit them from the side, then disappear before the Germans can respond. Panthers trying to encircle an American position. Hellcats set up ambushes on the approach routes, knock out the lead vehicles, then pull back. The 76mm gun on the Hellcat is significantly more powerful than the Sherman's 75mm. At medium range, it can penetrate a Panther's side armor, sometimes even the frontal armor if the angle is right, and because the Hellcat is so fast, it can choose its engagements, hit where the enemy is weak, avoid where the enemy is strong. By midday, the Germans are taking losses they didn't expect. Panthers knocked out by flanking Hellcats, supply columns destroyed by roving Hellcat patrols, German infantry pinned down by combined Hellcat and artillery fire, but the Germans keep coming, because they have no choice. By 6 p.m. September 22nd, the fighting begins to die down, not because either side has won, because both sides are exhausted. The Germans have advanced in some sectors, a few hundred yards here, a village there, but they haven't broken through. Arracourt is still in American hands, and the cost has been catastrophic. German losses, September 22nd, 43 tanks destroyed or disabled, most of them Panthers from the 111th Panzer Brigade, over 150 casualties, killed, wounded, captured, multiple supply vehicles destroyed. The 111th Panzer Brigade, Germany's elite new formation, equipped with the best tanks the Reich could produce, has effectively ceased to exist as a fighting force. In one day, American losses: 14 tanks destroyed, Shermans and Hellcats, 88 casualties, killed and wounded, ammunition stocks depleted, fuel running low. The Americans held, barely. But they held. The crews are utterly spent. Some units have been fighting continuously for 12 hours. Loaders are so exhausted they can barely lift shells into the breach. Drivers are falling asleep at the controls. Commanders are hoarse from shouting orders over the radio. At German headquarters, the situation is clear. Von Manteuffel's staff officers are delivering after-action reports. The numbers are devastating. The 111th Panzer Brigade is destroyed. The 113th is battered. Ammunition is running low. Fuel reserves are critical. Any rational commander would order a withdrawal, consolidate what's left, pull back to defensible positions, regroup and reassess. Von Manteuffel knows this. His officers know this. One of his commanders later described the mood. "We had done everything possible. The men had fought bravely, but the cost was unsustainable." Logic would dictate that the Germans retreat, but logic has nothing to do with it, because Adolf Hitler has issued a direct order. Hitler is micromanaging the battle from his headquarters hundreds of miles away. He doesn't care about casualty reports. He doesn't care about tactical realities. He wants Nancy, and he's willing to sacrifice what remains of the 5th Panzer Army to get it. Von Manteuffel has no choice. Orders are orders. So the Germans will attack again. Not because it makes sense, not because they have a chance of success. Because Hitler demands it. The Battle of Arracourt isn't over. Not yet. September 24th, 1944. 2 days after the destruction of the 111th Panzer Brigade. Logic says the Germans should be done, retreating, licking their wounds. But Hitler's order is absolute. Continue the attack. So the Germans shift their focus. If they can't break through Combat Command A in the north, they'll try Combat Command B in the south. Combat Command B, same division as CCA, the 4th Armored, but positioned 5 miles south. They've been watching the carnage to the north. They know what's coming. At 7:00 a.m., German artillery opens up. 105mm and 150mm shells rain down on CCB positions. Not a short preparatory barrage. A sustained bombardment. 30 minutes. An hour. The ground shakes. Trees are shredded. Stone buildings collapse. Then the infantry comes. German Panzer grenadiers, armored infantry, advancing behind half-tracks and assault guns. Not tanks, not yet. Infantry, trying to clear American defensive positions before the armor moves in, and they're hitting CCB from 3 directions simultaneously. East, southeast, south. The Americans are surrounded on 3 sides. Radio traffic is urgent but controlled. Contact south, infantry in strength, requesting fire mission. Enemy half-tracks, 2 o'clock, range 800 yards. We're taking artillery, multiple calibers. This is what the Germans have learned from the last 5 days. Don't lead with tanks, lead with infantry and artillery, suppress the defenders, force them to keep their heads down, then bring in the armor. CCB is holding, barely, but ammunition is running low, casualties are mounting, the defensive perimeter is shrinking. By 9 a.m. German tanks begin to appear. Panthers, Stog assault guns, Panzer IVs. Not as many as before. The Germans don't have as many left, but enough. For 2 hours, it's a slugfest. German tanks fire from long range. American tanks fire back from cover. Artillery from both sides pounds the battlefield. Infantry on both sides fights building to building in the villages. CCB is holding, but just barely. At 11:15 a.m., the weather changes. The clouds break, the sky clears, and the P-47 Thunderbolts return. The German attack on CCB is concentrated in a relatively small area, maybe 2 square miles. Tanks, infantry, supply vehicles, artillery positions, all packed together, perfect targets. The P-47s come in waves. First wave, rockets and bombs, hitting German armor and artillery. Second wave, strafing runs, 850 caliber machine guns per aircraft, shredding anything that moves. Third wave, more bombs, finishing off anything still burning. The German attack doesn't just stall, it breaks. Within 15 minutes, 11 German tanks are destroyed or disabled, not by American tanks, by aircraft. The German infantry, already exhausted from hours of fighting, pulls back. The armor, what's left of it, retreats to cover. The attack on CCB is over. American forward observers later report watching German survivors staggering back toward their lines. No organization, no cohesion, just exhausted men trying to get away from the killing zone. This is the reality of the Western Front in 1944. You can have the best tanks in the world, but if your enemy controls the skies, you die. September 25th, 1944. The Germans throw in their last reserve. The 11th Panzer Division, the Ghost Division, one of the most storied units in the Wehrmacht. Fought in Russia since 1941, survived Stalingrad, battled across Ukraine, bloodied at Kursk. When the 11th Panzer Division arrives, American intelligence officers take notice. This isn't a green unit with undertrained crews. These are veterans. But there's a problem. The 11th Panzer Division isn't the elite formation it once was. 3 years of fighting on the Eastern Front have bled it dry. By the time it reaches Arracourt, the division has 16 operational tanks, not 60, 16. 2 batteries of artillery, that's 12 guns, maybe 1,500 infantry. At full strength, a Panzer division should have over 10,000 men. This isn't an elite striking force, it's the walking wounded, but they're still Germans, still professional, still dangerous, and Hitler's orders remain. Attack. The 11th Panzer is assigned a new axis of attack, not toward Arracourt directly, north, through the villages of Marsal and Moyenvik. Try to flank the American positions from the east. On paper, it's a reasonable plan. Hit the Americans where they're not expecting it. Use experience and professionalism to compensate for lack of numbers. In reality, it fails almost immediately. American reconnaissance spots the German movement within hours. Artillery is called in. Tank destroyers reposition to intercept. The 11th Panzer runs headlong into prepared American defenses. By the end of September 26th, The Ghost Division has lost half its remaining tanks. 8 Panthers and Panzer IVs destroyed or abandoned. Casualties mounting, no breakthrough achieved. The legend of the 11th Panzer Division doesn't save them, because legends don't stop artillery shells. September 27th, 1944. The Germans make one last attempt to break through to Arracourt. Not because they think they can win, because they've been ordered to try. The attack is half-hearted. The tank crews are exhausted. The infantry is depleted. Ammunition is running low. Everyone knows this is the end. At 8:01 a.m., American forces counterattack. Not a massive assault, not a war-winning offensive. Just a hard, professional shove, pushing the Germans back, retaking lost ground, forcing them onto the defensive. The Germans resist. They fight skillfully. Veterans of the 11th Panzer make the Americans pay for every yard, but they're outnumbered, outgunned, out of options. By midday, the German attack has collapsed, not routed, not destroyed, but stopped. The Germans pull back south, dig in, transition to defensive operations. They'll hold the ground they have, but they're not attacking anymore. The Battle of Arracourt is over. The cost, German losses, September 18th, 27. 86 tanks destroyed or abandoned, 25 plus other armored vehicles, 600 plus casualties, multiple units rendered combat ineffective. American losses, 25-30 tanks destroyed, 200 plus casualties. Defensive line held. It's not Normandy. It's not the Bulge. It's not Berlin. But for 10 days in September 1944, a few thousand American tank crews stopped one of Germany's last armored offensives in the West. They held, against better tanks, against veteran German units, against direct orders from Adolf Hitler himself. They held. So the battle is over. But what did it mean? When the fighting finally stopped on September 27, 1944, both sides began counting the cost. The numbers tell the story. German losses at Arracourt, approximately 281 tanks and armored vehicles destroyed or captured. That's the American claim. German records, what survived, suggest the number is closer to 200. Either way, it's catastrophic. 2 entire panzer brigades, the 111th and 113th, effectively ceased to exist. The 11th Panzer Division, the legendary Ghost Division, was bled white, reduced to a shadow formation. Over 3,000 German soldiers killed or wounded, another 3,000 captured. Entire battalions wiped out, companies reduced to squads. Experienced tank crews, irreplaceable in late 1944, gone. American losses, 21 tanks destroyed, 25 killed in action, 88 wounded. Read those numbers again. The Germans lost over 200 tanks. The Americans lost 21. This isn't a close fight. This isn't a Pyrrhic victory. This is a one-sided slaughter. For every American tank destroyed, the Germans lost 10. For every American killed, the Germans lost over 100 killed or captured. These numbers raise a question. How? How did American tankers, in supposedly inferior tanks, outnumbered facing elite German units, achieve this kind of victory? The answer isn't what most people think. It's not because the Sherman was better than the Panther. It wasn't. It's not because American tankers were braver. Both sides fought with courage. The Americans won because of 5 factors that had nothing to do with armor thickness. First, tactics. American tank crews didn't fight the way the Germans expected. They didn't charge. They didn't try to win gun duels at long range. They used terrain, fought from hull-down positions, ambushed from flanks, hit and moved. Captain Lamisson at Bézange-la-Petite, 4 Shermans destroying 8 Panthers in 10 minutes. That wasn't luck. That was positioning, patience, and knowing where to shoot. Second, air power. The P-47, Thunderbolts didn't just support the ground forces, they saved them. Every time the Germans massed for an attack, American aircraft tore them apart. September 24th. 11 German tanks destroyed in 15 minutes. Not by Shermans, by aircraft. The Germans couldn't move in daylight, couldn't concentrate forces, couldn't resupply. You can have the best tank in the world, but if you can't move it without being bombed, it's useless. Third, crew training. American tank crews trained together for months before entering combat. Driver, gunner, loader, commander. They functioned as a single unit. German crews in late 1944. Many were replacements, undertrained, thrown into combat with crews they'd never worked with. Experience matters. A veteran gunner can identify a target, range it, and fire in seconds. An inexperienced gunner takes twice as long, and in tank combat, seconds are the difference between life and death. Fourth, logistics. The Americans had fuel, ammunition, spare parts, food. The Germans were running on fumes. Panther tanks are fuel hogs. They need constant maintenance. They break down frequently. American supply lines kept the Shermans running. German supply lines barely existed. By the end of the battle, some German units were abandoning operational tanks simply because they had no fuel to move them. Fifth, combined arms. The Americans didn't just use tanks. They used tanks, artillery, tank destroyers, infantry, engineers, and air support, all working together. When a German attack started, American forward observers called in artillery within minutes. Tank destroyers raced to threaten sectors. Infantry held key positions. Aircraft struck rear areas. The Germans were fighting with tanks and willpower. The Americans were fighting with a system. That's why the Americans won, not because they had better tanks, because they used everything better. So what did the Battle of Arracourt actually mean? In the grand sweep of World War II, it's barely a footnote. It's not D-Day. It's not the Bulge. It's not Berlin. But strategically, Arracourt mattered. This was Germany's last chance to stabilize the front in eastern France. If the 5th Panzer Army could stop Patton at Arracourt, they could hold the line along the Moselle River, protect the approaches to Germany, buy time to rebuild defenses. They failed. After Arracourt, the road to the Moselle, and beyond it, the Rhine and Germany itself, was open. Patton's Third Army continued its advance. By November, they were fighting in the streets of Metz. By December, they were approaching the German border, and the German armored reserves that might have stopped them, destroyed at Arracourt, the 111th Panzer Brigade, the 113th Panzer Brigade, the 11th Panzer Division, gone. Those tanks, those crews, those experienced officers, Germany couldn't replace them. By late 1944, Germany was running out of everything. Fuel, ammunition, trained soldiers, and at Arracourt, they lost nearly 300 tanks they couldn't afford to lose. Arracourt didn't end the war, but it helped ensure that Germany couldn't stop the inevitable. So why don't more people know about Arracourt? Why isn't it taught in schools? Why aren't there movies about it? Timing. While the Battle of Arracourt was raging, Operation Market Garden, the massive Allied airborne assault in the Netherlands, was collapsing into disaster. That's what made the headlines. That's what the newspapers covered. Arracourt was happening at the same time, but it was overshadowed. And in the months that followed, bigger, bloodier battles grabbed the attention. The siege of Metz, the fight for Aachen, the nightmare of Hürtgen Forest. Arracourt was just one more battle in a war full of battles. It wasn't dramatic enough, wasn't costly enough, wasn't famous enough. It was a small-town fight in eastern France that most people have never heard of. But for the men who fought there, it was everything. For the tank crews of the 4th Armored Division, Arracourt was 10 days of hell. 10 days of being outnumbered, outgunned, and told to hold the line anyway. 10 days of watching friends die, of loading shells until their hands bled, of sleeping in their tanks because there was no time to rest. And they held. Not because they had better equipment, not because they were invincible, because they were Americans doing an impossible job, and they refused to quit. 80 years later, the fields around Arracourt are quiet. The villages have been rebuilt. The tank wrecks have been cleared away. There's a small memorial, a few plaques, not much else. But if you know where to look, if you know the story, you can still see it. The ridgeline where Captain Lammerson made his stand. The roads where Hellcats raced to intercept German columns. The fields where hundreds of tanks fought and died. History remembers the big battles, but wars are won in small towns like Arracourt, by ordinary men doing extraordinary things, and that's a story worth remembering. Years later, the men who fought at Arracourt were asked what they remembered most. Not the tactics, not the kill ratios, not the strategic importance. One tanker from the 37th Tank Battalion said, "I remember thinking we were going to die. Every time a Panther showed up, I thought, this is it. But we didn't. We kept fighting, and somehow, we won." Another, a gunner from C Company. "The Sherman wasn't the best tank. We knew that, but it was ours, and we made it work." A tank commander, decades after the war. "People ask me if I was scared. Of course I was scared. But you don't think about that when your loader is handing you shells, and your driver is backing you into cover, and your gunner is lining up a shot. You just do your job." That's what Arracourt was. Not a story about machines. A story about men doing their jobs under impossible circumstances and refusing to break. The Battle of Arracourt ended on September 27, 1944, but the war didn't. The 4th Armored Division kept fighting. In November, they fought in the brutal siege of Metz, street-to-street combat in one of France's most heavily fortified cities. In December, when the Germans launched their surprise offensive in the Ardennes, the Battle of the Bulge, the 4th Armored raced north to relieve the encircled 101st Airborne at Bastogne. By March 1945, they crossed the Rhine River into Germany itself. And on April 4, 1945, elements of the 4th Armored Division liberated Ohrdruf concentration camp. It was one of the first concentration camps liberated by American forces. The tankers who had fought at Arracourt, who had survived Metz, the Bulge, the Rhine, saw what they had been fighting against. General Patton visited the camp. He was physically sick at what he saw, but the men of the 4th Armored kept moving forward, because that's what they did. By May 8, 1945, VE Day, the 4th Armored Division had fought across France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. They had been in combat for 11 months. They had earned more battle honors than almost any other American armored division. And it started at a small town in eastern France that most of them had never heard of before September 1944. Arracourt. Today, Arracourt is quiet. A small farming village in Lorraine. Population, a few hundred. There's a memorial, a simple stone marker on the edge of town. It lists the units that fought here, the dates, a few names. The locals remember. Every September there's a small ceremony. French villagers and a handful of American veterans, fewer each year, gather to lay wreaths and remember. But the world has forgotten. There are no movies about Arracourt, no best-selling books, no dramatic documentaries on streaming services. It's just a footnote in history, a small battle in a big war. But the men who fought here didn't fight for fame. They fought because they were ordered to, because their friends were beside them, because surrender wasn't an option, and they won. Against better tanks, against veteran German units, against the odds, they won. That deserves to be remembered. When a Sherman met a Panther on the battlefield, the outcome seemed predetermined. The Panther was bigger, better armored, more powerful. On paper, the Sherman didn't stand a chance. But war isn't fought on paper. War is fought by men. Men who train together, who trust each other, who adapt when plans fall apart. Men who use terrain, timing and tactics to overcome an enemy with better equipment. Arracourt proved something important. The better tank doesn't always win. The better tanker does. The better crew, the better coordination, the better system. Yes, the world forgot this battle. It's not taught in schools. It's not in the history books most people read, but history remembers. Military historians study Arracourt as a textbook example of how to fight a superior enemy. Tankers at Fort Benning learn about Captain Lamesson's defense at Bézange-la-Petite. French villagers still place flowers at the memorial every September. And now, you remember too, because this story of ordinary men in ordinary tanks doing extraordinary things deserves to be told, not because it's dramatic, not because it's famous, but because it's true, and the truth is worth remembering.